Hello, Sisu Circle, and welcome back to another episode of Who's the Baby, a podcast where me and my emotional support mug dive into everything inner child. And on today's episode, I'm really excited to dive into co-regulation and how this can lead into fawning, which is a trauma response. The reason I'm doing both of these together is I do think there is a huge link between them, but also I think that fawning as a trauma response is probably least discussed. Without further ado, let's get started. Co-regulation is a basic human need. Nervous system regulation allows us to process stress, learn soothing and coping mechanisms. It is the primary form of regulation that you receive as a child. So right from birth, you are kind of at the mercy of your caregivers. And it is up to the example of your caregiver to teach you how to regulate. We don't come out of the womb being fully independent beings, right? We have to essentially rely on others for most of our childhood. We learn independence and we learn how to do tasks through these relationships that we build with others and attached to our caregivers. Co-regulation, think about it as when you're upset, someone coming over and giving you a hug and singing or humming or rocking you in a comforting way. It's that soothing, regulating your nervous system. And when your caregiver has a regulated nervous system, this is very easy for tiny you then to drop in and sort of come back to that more regulated state. Why it is so important to learn these regulating skills is because if we don't and our body stays in these chronic state of stress, that can cause physical health problems over time, because your body remembers and holds on to things like anger and rage that can express later on as inflammation or disease. As parents to little humans, we kind of need to do a better job of taking a little bit more responsibility for our behaviors and our actions in the way that they are shaping our children. Now, I'm not actually talking about real neglect or abuse in most cases. Obviously, those do still exist. But for today's purposes, I mean, it can be something as simple as a stressed out parent, a parent who is checked out emotionally, or a parent who doesn't have the emotional intelligence even to unpack or understand where they are within their own regulation. Remember, your child is going to pick up on all of these little things. We're very receptive beings, very intuitive and adaptive beings. We are going to perceive your stress, and that's another piece of this co-regulation, is that if my survival is reliant on you, and if you're dysregulated, I am then going to do everything in my power to make sure that you stay, even if that means sacrificing my own emotions and my own needs. Okay, so that is essentially the definition of fawning. You are overcorrecting or overcompensating for that dysregulated relationship to maintain your survival, to maintain that relationship so that you don't get abandoned. Because in every tiny human's little body, what is the greatest fear? It's fear of being left by the herd, that abandonment. Children need connection. When those needs aren't met, their brain subconsciously perceives that as a threat. And that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be actual neglect or physical abuse. It just can be something as simple as a perceived threat. Children don't yet have the brain function or altitude to sort of step outside of themselves. So everything to them, they take personally. Everything is personal. And at a very basic level, you can think of this personalization coupled with the need not being met, that can then lead to feelings of abandonment. Tiny you, if your caregiver is in a dysregulated state or in a chronic state of stress, guess what happens for you? You, adaptive tiny you, out of survival, will then create these coping skills and coping strategies to help you out. So that can manifest as all sorts of things. For example, the child of a single parent can read signals from that parent that their needs or desires are basically too much. So if I'm a single mom and I have been working all day, I've just gotten home from job number 2. I still have to do laundry. I still have to cook dinner. I still have to bathe my children. There's still so much that I have to do on my to-do list. I am in a hyper state of awareness. I am in a hyper state of stress. My children will perceive this state of stress. One of or all of those children might then read those signals from me and basically say, for the sake of not furthering disrupt my mom's state of being, I'm then just going to quiet down. I'm just then going to shut down. I'm just then going to deny what I need to make sure that she's okay, so that in turn we're all okay. As an adaptive strategy, it's very functional. It's supposed to be one of these things that when you go back to regulation, it works. What happens is, if this is your default method, if this is something that has been programmed and the pattern repeats, it becomes more of an automatic programming. If this is your kind of default coping mechanism, as you get older, you might see that this could create some problems for you. As an adult, we can come out expressing too much responsibility for things. We can overcompensate. We can people please. We can not be very good at holding our boundaries. We can be over giving. We can be overachieving. So there can be challenges in our personal relationships. There can be challenging in work environments, and this can be challenging in sexual relationships. Essentially, what we are doing as dysregulated parents is setting our children up for their boundaries to consistently be violated or overstepped. And this creates a heightened stress level for them to perform, to be hypervigilant of others' feelings and others' emotional well-being. This can lead to things like perfectionism, workaholicism. They don't even know their own needs or boundaries, and that can be detrimental to their health long term. Let's talk about at work, for example. Think then, is this expected of me? Will I have to overdo, overperform, avoid feeling the fear of what might happen if I don't live up to others' expectations of me, or other people's, what I perceive as their expectations of me? Rather than having the difficult conversation with a boss saying, what are my expectations? Because that is just too much. That can lead someone who is in this fawn response to go into a freeze, to be like, nope, there is absolutely no way I can have this conversation, because that is the abandonment fear kicking in. Because what's the worst case scenario that will happen if this conversation doesn't go my way? Is abandonment. I could lose my job. I'm going to be out of the herd, right? I'm out of the pack. And that is just too much fear. That's just too much struggle for your brain to go in. So essentially what ends up happening is that we don't have those difficult conversations. We put that stress on ourselves. Internally, though, the stress that we are creating on ourselves is what is causing that inflammation, is what is causing disease long term. So if we are not learning how to regulate ourselves, even as adults, this can create huge problems. Let's talk about how this may affect relationships. We used to call it people pleasing. We thought it was a personality trait. Well, they're just so amicable, or they're just, they're so easy. They appease everybody. No, what's happening is likely a trauma response. If you are noticing that your child is struggling, what are some things that we can look out for? If you see a child is having trouble expressing themselves or expressing their needs, a lot of times it's the kids that you don't see, right? They're just flying under the radar. They're just kind of easy, amicable kids. If they have trouble saying no, if they over apologize, you might see that they might be holding something back in conversation because it might be too controversial or confrontational. If they struggle with assuming responsibility for the emotional reaction and response of others, fixing or rescuing people from their problems, attempting to control others' choices to maintain a sense of emotional safety. Yeah, wow, those are huge. So think about in personal relationships as adults, how difficult that can be to try to keep that up constantly. That is exhausting. You're just asking for stress and fatigue and exhaustion to kick in. I really want parents to kind of take accountability here and really, really get in touch with how you're doing with your own regulation, because it certainly has an impact. That's every child is going to fall into this fawn trauma response. A lot of it is just awareness of parents themselves taking an honest account as to how I'm doing with my own regulation, and am I being present with my child and giving them the connection and the attention that they need. When I'm talking about children perceiving these threats, a lot of times this is happening in early stages of development, well before children are even verbal, year 1 through 2. They are already having these intuitive, adaptive strategies, and they're already being patterned into their normal day-to-day behavior. If you want to break out of those cycles, the first things you want to try to address with them is validating their experience and validating their feelings, right? Trying to, instead of being critical, just letting them have the feelings and letting them feel it out. And letting them know that it's okay, letting them know that you're going to be there for them either way. And as parents, it's difficult for us to witness our child being in a state of rage, being in a state of anger. These are not emotions that we like to see. But if that's the emotion that's coming up, we need to allow that emotion to happen, as well as be able to help them process through that emotion. We also need to help them understand that emotions are signals. We want to encourage the emotion because the emotion is a signal. The emotion is trying to tell us something. It is trying to help us understand something. So instead of looking at the emotion as a negative, a good, or a bad emotion and placing such a black and white label on it, allow that emotion to come and then try to process, what is this trying to tell me? I know I'm feeling this for a reason. What is it exactly trying to say? There's a Disney movie out there called Elements, and they talk about anger and they talk about what it might mean. And I love it. I think it's such a beautiful, simple sort of example, but it does make so much sense. And that anger is something that I'm trying to tell myself that I just might not be ready to hear. I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready to hear it yet. I thought that was the most adorable way to talk about anger. Of course, we want our children to be happy and flourish. That was the new wave thing back in the 90s was, what do you want to be when you grow older? I want to be happy. Well, I can tell you that happiness is not something that is a chronic state of being. You can be well, you can be fulfilled, but happiness is an emotion. It's a fleeting feeling. You can have joy, you can feel happy, but essentially that's not a chronic state of being. Same with anger. We have to help our kids and help ourselves sit with that discomfort, sit with, you might be perceiving this as a negative emotion, but emotions are just emotions and they are fleeting and they are there to tell us something. So let's get to the root of what it's trying to tell us, and let's tackle that together as a team. Because as we said, children need that connection. They need to know that you're going to be there even in their ugly, okay? Even when their emotions previously might have been too big, or when their feelings might not have been validated. So the first steps to correcting that is to then say, I love you even when you're angry. I love you when you're upset. I love you when you're mad. I'm always going to be here with you, and we're going to get through this together. Whatever it is, I'm here to help you figure it out, because that's my job as your mama or whatever caregiver you are. Another strategy that might work if you have a child that is fawning is, as a parent, not trying to fix or correct whatever emotion is coming up. We talk about fear, rage, anger. Of course, we want to be able to fix those feelings for our kids because we want to ensure that they are going to be okay. But sometimes that's not on us to do. Sometimes we want to allow our children to spread their wings and do it themselves, right? Show you that they can regulate themselves. It's all about these habits, forming and building these habits into, I can do it. This is a feeling, this is an emotion, this is fleeting, it will go away. The more practice they get, the better at it they will be in the long term. So if you have gotten to a point where you feel good about your child being able to handle and regulate, the less you can stop trying to fix or stop trying to correct, because then again, we are just setting the example that we're here to overdo, that we're here to control others' feelings and emotions. Well, that's all I have for you today. Drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, leave a review. If you have any ideas, please feel free to reach out and let me know. So from me and my emotional support mug, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the other side. Cheers!